The oldest brother got everything, while I received an old coin and a laugh. Michael Peterson felt his chest tighten as the family lawyer opened the sealed envelope containing his father's will. Robert Peterson had passed away the week before, leaving the two sons in a tension that had lasted decades. Dr. Thompson adjusted his glasses and began reading the document in a solemn voice. With every word, Michael saw his life crumbling before his eyes. His older brother, Andrew, would inherit all the businesses, the properties in New York City, the investments, and even a sum of money that would allow anyone to live like royalty for the rest of their life. "And to my son Michael," the lawyer continued, hesitating for a moment, "I leave this coin that I always carried with me, certain that he will know its true worth." Silence filled the elegant office. Andrew began to chuckle softly, then louder and louder, until his laughter echoed off the dark wooden walls. "A coin?" Andrew wiped away a tear from laughing so hard. "Dad always knew who deserved what. You were never more than a dreamer, Michael. You never understood business like I did." Michael picked up the small rusted coin the lawyer handed him. It was old, heavy, with engravings he could barely make out. It seemed worth no more than a few cents. The weight of humiliation was heavier than the coin itself. "Is there anything else?" Michael asked, trying to maintain his dignity. "That's all," replied Dr. Thompson, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. Andrew was already on his feet, adjusting the jacket of his expensive suit, smiling like someone who had just won the lottery. "Well, little brother, it's been a pleasure. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a company to run. Maybe you can buy yourself a coffee with that little coin." Michael left the office without a word. The streets of New York City seemed louder than usual, or maybe it was just the turmoil in his head. 35 years of life, always trying to prove his worth to his father, always hearing he needed to be more like Andrew, more business-minded, less idealistic. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing, he arrived at his modest apartment in Queens and collapsed onto the old couch he'd bought used years ago. The coin lay in his palm, small and seemingly worthless. He turned it over and over, trying to decipher the worn engravings. In the days that followed, Michael barely left the house. Friends called, concerned, but he couldn't bring himself to explain what had happened. How could he say his father had left a fortune to his brother and an old coin to him? How could he admit that, even after all these years, he still felt like the rejected son? A week later, he decided he needed to understand. There was something about that coin his father had wanted him to know. He remembered Mrs. Henderson, Robert's longtime secretary, who had worked with him for over 20 years. If anyone might have a clue about that coin, it would be her. He found Mrs. Henderson at a bakery near his father's old office. The woman in her mid-60s greeted him warmly, but her eyes were red, clearly still shaken by her boss's passing. "Michael, my dear, I'm so sorry for everything. Your father was a complicated man, you know. Mrs. Henderson, I need to ask you something strange. He left me a coin in his will. Do you know anything about it?" Mrs. Henderson's expression changed, as if a distant memory had resurfaced. "In his last months, your father became obsessed with a coin he always carried in his pocket. Sometimes I'd catch him staring at it for long minutes, as if remembering something important. He even asked me if I knew anything about old societies in New York City." "Old societies?" "Yes, he was researching mutual aid groups that existed decades ago, but he never told me why. All I know is he spent weeks going to the New York Public Library in Manhattan and talking to older folks in the neighborhood." Michael felt a chill in his stomach. There was something his father hadn't told anyone, something related to that coin. He thanked Mrs. Henderson and left, determined to uncover the truth. First stop, the New York Public Library in Manhattan. Michael had never been much of a researcher, but now he had a mission. He spent hours flipping through old books about the city's history, searching for any reference to societies, groups, or organizations that might have used coins as symbols. It was on a rainy Thursday afternoon that he found something. A book about New York's social history in the 1960s and 1970s briefly mentioned the St. Joseph Mutual Aid Society, a group that helped struggling families in the city center. The organization had been formed by local merchants and businessmen who preferred to keep their actions secret. The book was sparse on details, but mentioned that society members were identified by special tokens, commemorative coins that proved their membership. Michael's heart raced. He pulled the coin from his pocket and examined it again. The inscriptions were worn, but he could make out what looked like SSM and what might have been a date. Meanwhile, across town, Andrew was facing his first problems as the new head of the family empire. Suppliers showed up demanding payments that weren't recorded anywhere in the official books. Long-time employees spoke of verbal commitments his father had made, but never documented. "What do you mean my father promised to pay for your daughter's surgery?" Andrew asked George, the doorman at the company's main office building. "There's no record of this anywhere." "But he promised, Mr. Andrew. My girl needs the operation and your father said he'd help. It's already scheduled for next week." Andrew sighed in frustration. Since taking over the business, stories like this popped up every day. Employees claiming his father had promised this or that. Suppliers mentioning special deals. Entire families showing up saying Robert had been helping them with something. "Look, George, I can't pay for my father's promises. If he said something and didn't put it in writing, that's not my problem." The man's face fell. George had worked there for 15 years, always loyal, and now watched his last hope slip away. Michael continued his investigation. He discovered the library had a special section with documents donated by old city families. There he found a folder of newspaper clippings from the 1970s mentioning social initiatives carried out by a group of businessmen, always anonymously. One article from 1973 told of a family who lost everything in a fire and mysteriously received help rebuilding their lives. Another, from 1975, mentioned underprivileged children given school supplies and uniforms from an unknown source. Always the same pattern: quiet, anonymous help, no fanfare. That's when he decided to visit an antique dealer. If that coin was truly old and special, an expert might have more information. He found an old shop on Broadway, run by a white-haired man named Walter. "Interesting," Walter murmured, examining the coin with a magnifying glass. "Very interesting indeed. Do you know anything about it?" "I do, son. This is a commemorative coin from the St. Joseph Mutual Aid Society. Very few were made, only for the most important members of the group. Look, here's the date, 1971, and these inscriptions: serve in silence, love without measure." Michael felt a shiver run down his spine. "Do you know more about this society?" "Of course I do. My own father was helped by them when I was a boy. We never knew who they were, but they showed up in the hardest times. They said they had informants in every neighborhood, people who identified families in need and passed the information to the group." "Does it still exist?" "I don't know, son. In the 1980s they stopped appearing in the papers, but the older folks in the neighborhood still speak fondly of those people." "Your coin here," Walter handed the object back to Michael, "is worth far more than any money. It's a symbol of genuine kindness." Michael left the store with more questions than answers. Had his father been a member of this society? Why had he never told his children anything about it? And why leave the coin specifically for him? That night, Michael couldn't sleep. He stood by the apartment window, gazing at the city lights, imagining his father as a young man, secretly taking part in efforts to help those in need. It was a completely different image from the cold, calculating man he had known. Meanwhile, Andrew spent the night in the office, trying to make sense of the company's finances. There were gaps in the records, transactions that made no sense, money that had disappeared without clear explanation. The more he dug, the more he discovered that his father had kept an entire side of the business completely hidden. The next morning, Michael decided he needed more information. He returned to the library and searched through old newspaper archives, this time focusing on the 1960s. It was a long and exhausting search, but it paid off. In a 1968 edition of the local paper, he found a photo that made him stop breathing for a moment. It was an image of a group of men delivering donations to a needy family at Christmas. The photo was dark and slightly blurred, but he immediately recognized one of the faces. His father, Robert Peterson, very young, smiling alongside others as they handed gifts to children. The caption simply read, Local businessmen spread holiday cheer, but it didn't mention any names. It was clear his father had gone out of his way to remain anonymous. Michael took a photo of the page with his phone and kept searching. In several other editions, he found mentions of similar efforts, always with the same care to conceal identities. His father had spent decades of his life secretly helping others. But why so much secrecy? Why had he never told his family? The answer came a few days later, when Michael decided to speak with older residents of the neighborhood where he'd grown up. He talked to Mrs. Wilkins, the longtime neighbor who had known the family for over 40 years. "Your father was a man divided, Michael," she said as she poured coffee in her small kitchen. "In public, he had to be tough, competitive to survive in the business world. But deep down, he always had a heart of gold." But why hide it? Why not talk about the good he was doing? Because in the 1970s, helping the poor was seen as something communists did, my dear. Your father was afraid it would hurt his business if people knew he gave money to those in need. It was a complicated time. Did my mother know? Mrs. Wilkins hesitated for a moment. Your mother found out a few years before she passed. She was proud but also upset she'd been kept in the dark for so long. I think it created a barrier between them. Michael began to understand the complexity of his father. The man had built a public persona as a ruthless businessman to protect his true nature, and that division had affected the entire family. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing, he decided he needed to talk to Andrew. Despite all the rivalry between them, his brother deserved to know the truth about their father. He called the company office. "Andrew, I need to talk to you. It's about Dad." "Michael, I don't have time for your whining. The company's in serious trouble and I need to fix it." "That's exactly what I want to talk about. I found out some things that might explain the problems you're facing." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Fine, come here now, but make it quick." Michael arrived at the company's main office and was struck by the chaos. Employees were running back and forth, phones were ringing non-stop, and Andrew looked visibly stressed with deep bags under his eyes and his hair disheveled. "What did you find out?" Andrew asked bluntly. Michael showed the photos he'd taken of the old newspapers and told him about the St. Joseph Mutual Aid Society. With every word, he watched his brother's expression shift from irritation to surprise, then to something like disbelief. "Are you saying our father was using company money to help strangers?" "They weren't strangers, Andrew. They were people in need. And from what I've learned, he'd been doing it for decades." "That explains a lot." Andrew slumped into his chair, looking defeated. "People show up every day saying Dad promised them help. I thought they were just opportunists, but maybe he really did commit to them." Andrew buried his face in his hands. "Michael, the company's almost bankrupt. There are debts I don't understand, obligations I can't meet, and employees counting on promises Dad made. I don't know what to do." For the first time in years, Michael saw vulnerability in his older brother. Andrew had always been the strong one, the successful one, their father's pride. Seeing him like this, lost and scared, stirred a compassion in Michael he hadn't expected. "Maybe I can help." "How, with an old coin?" "Maybe that coin is more important than we think." Michael went home determined to uncover everything about the coin and the society. He spent the next few days visiting old neighborhoods, talking to elderly folks, always asking about aid groups from decades ago. It was on a Saturday afternoon that he found the most important clue. In a park in Park Slope, chatting with a group of retirees playing dominoes, he heard a story from a man named Clarence that changed everything. The St. Joseph Mutual Aid Society. "Of course I remember. They saved my family in the 1970s, said Clarence, a black man around 70. "My wife got sick, I was out of work, and we had 3 little kids. Out of nowhere, a man showed up saying he knew about our situation and wanted to help." "And who was that man?" "He never gave his name, just said he represented a group of people who cared. He paid for my wife's treatment, got me a job at a company in Manhattan, and even gave us money for food for a few months." "Did you ever see a coin like this?" Michael showed him his inheritance. Clarence's eyes lit up. "Of course. The man showed us a coin just like that when he came to help. Said it was his group's symbol. In fact, I think I still have the address he gave me in case I wanted to thank him in person. Clarence left and returned a few minutes later with a yellowed piece of paper. There was an address in the city centre and a name, Robert Peterson. Michael's legs nearly gave out. His father wasn't just a member of the society. From the stories he'd heard, it sounded like he'd been one of its most active members. Clarence, do you remember anything else about this group? I remember Mr. Robert telling me they had one rule. Whoever received help should, when possible, help others, to create a chain of kindness. That's why years later, when I got back on my feet, I also started helping families in need in my neighborhood. And you still do that? Yes, I do. I have a small group here in the area. Nothing too elaborate, but we try to identify families who need help and do our part. I learned from Mr. Robert that true wealth lies in being able to change other people's lives. Michael left the conversation with Clarence completely transformed. He finally understood why his father had left the coin for him. It wasn't just a symbol, it was an invitation to continue a legacy. That night, he called Andrew. I need you to come to my apartment. I have something important to show you. Michael, it's late and I have... Andrew, please. It's about the company's future and what Dad really wanted. An hour later, Andrew was sitting on Michael's modest couch, listening intently as his brother shared everything he had discovered. He talked about Clarence, the support network their father had built, and the philosophy that those who receive help should help others. Do you see now why the company has all these commitments? Michael concluded. Dad used part of the profits to keep this solidarity network running. Andrew was silent for several minutes. Are you saying our father was practically a saint? I'm saying he found a way to use business success to make a difference in people's lives, and maybe the problems you're facing have a solution. How so? If Dad created a network of people who help each other, maybe those same people can help the company now. Have you thought about that? Andrew shook his head, as if processing a completely new idea. You're suggesting I ask poor people for help? I'm suggesting you talk to people Dad helped, who might now be in a position to give back. Clarence told me many of the families they supported managed to build stable lives over the years. And how would I find these people? Michael smiled and held up the coin. Maybe this is the key. In the following days, the brothers worked together for the first time in their lives. Michael used his ability to connect with people to map out the network their father had created, while Andrew assessed the company's financial needs. They discovered Robert had helped dozens of families over 4 decades. Some had prospered and opened small businesses, others had children who became successful professionals, and many still felt a deep gratitude to the man who had lifted them out of hardship. Clarence became an important ally, introducing the brothers to others who had been helped by the society. Each conversation revealed a new side of the father they had never known. Your father saved my family, said Mrs. Henderson, a woman who now owned a small clothing store. When my husband lost his job and we had 5 children to feed, he appeared like an angel. He paid our rent for 6 months and even found work for my husband. And now, how are things for you? Andrew asked. Thank God we're doing well. The store is thriving, my children are all grown, and whenever I can, I help other families the way we were helped. This was the story that kept repeating. People who had been helped and, years later, continued the chain of kindness Robert had started. Andrew began to understand that his father had built something far greater than a company. He had created a community, a mutual support network that had been thriving for decades. Michael, I think I'm starting to understand why Dad left the coin to you and not to me. Why? Because you have the ability to talk to people, to understand their needs. I've always been focused only on numbers, on profits. I never worried about the people behind the numbers. It was a hard admission for Andrew, who had spent his whole life believing his business efficiency was his greatest quality. But maybe that's exactly the combination Dad wanted, Michael suggested. Your ability to manage businesses and my skill with people. Together, we can continue what he started. The idea began to take shape. Instead of simply asking for financial help from those their father had helped, the brothers developed a more elaborate plan. They created a business solidarity fund where small business owners who had been assisted by Robert could invest in the family company, becoming minority partners. In return, the company would commit to continuing social initiatives and giving preference to suppliers and partners who also participated in the Solidarity Network. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us as we're just starting out. Now back to the story. The first meeting was scheduled for a Tuesday evening in the hall of a church in Queens. Michael had spread the word through Clarence and other key figures in the network. When they arrived, the brothers were amazed. Over 50 people had shown up, from elderly folks who had been helped decades ago to young professionals whose parents had received support from Robert. "Good evening, everyone," Michael began, holding the coin in his hands. "I know many of you knew my father, Robert Peterson, but perhaps you didn't realize my brother and I were his sons." A murmur spread through the room. Some stood to greet them, others wiped away tears remembering the man who had changed their lives. "We recently discovered our father lived a life we never knew," Michael continued. "A life dedicated to helping those in need. And now we understand he hoped we'd carry on that work." Andrew stood, clearly nervous about speaking publicly on matters that weren't strictly business. "The company our father built is facing difficulties," he admitted. "But we've learned those struggles came precisely from the commitments he made to you, and we want to honor those commitments." A woman in the front row raised her hand. "Mr. Andrew, my name is Dorothy. Your father paid for my son's college. He's a lawyer now. What do you need from us?" "We're not here to ask for charity," Andrew replied. "We're proposing a partnership, a way to keep the network our father created alive, but sustainably." Michael explained the Business Solidarity Fund idea. Each person could contribute according to their means, becoming part of the company and helping decide how resources would be used to keep helping other families. Questions came from all sides. Some wanted to understand the legal aspects better. Others questioned how they could ensure the money would be well spent. But what struck the brothers most was the enthusiasm. Nearly everyone wanted to participate. "Your father changed my life," said Richard, a middle-aged man. "I have a mechanics shop today thanks to his help. Count on me for anything." "He saved my marriage," Karen added. "When my husband lost his job and we fell into depression, your father didn't just give us money, he found him work. Now we have a small cleaning business and we want to give back." Story after story, the brothers heard accounts of how Robert had transformed lives, always discreetly, always asking only that people help others when they were able. By the end of the meeting, over 40 people had committed to joining the fund, some with small investments, others with more significant amounts, and many offering services and business partnerships. "Michael," said Clarence at the end of the evening, "your father would be proud. He always said his work would only be worthwhile if it took root, if others kept planting the seeds he had started." In the following days, the brothers worked tirelessly to legally structure the fund and define how the new society would operate. Michael discovered he had a talent for bringing people together and building consensus, while Andrew was surprised to realize he could use his business skills for purposes beyond profit. The family business was reorganized. Part of it became a cooperative where Robert's former beneficiaries became partners, while another part maintained the traditional structure to ensure financial sustainability. The first project under this new model was creating a microcredit program for small entrepreneurs in the area. Instead of simply giving money as Robert had done, they offered low-interest loans with technical support. "Dad gave the fish," Michael explained during a presentation to new applicants. "We want to teach how to fish." Andrew found he enjoyed business far more when it had a social purpose. The numbers still mattered, but now they represented families who would be helped, jobs that would be created, dreams that would come true. "I never imagined I'd feel so fulfilled working," he confessed to Michael one evening after a particularly productive meeting. "For years, I thought success was just about accumulating money. Now I understand that success is seeing money circulate and create more opportunities." "Dad knew that from the beginning," Michael replied. "That's why he left the coin to me and the business to you. He knew I'd discover the meaning of the coin and that you'd need to learn to value things beyond money." "Do you think he planned all this?" "I think he hoped we'd discover together that we're better when we work as a team." 3 months after the reading of the will, the company had not only stabilized financially, but was growing sustainably. The microcredit program had helped 15 families start small businesses, and the Solidarity Network had expanded to other neighborhoods. But the most moving moment came when Michael received a call from a young woman named Ashley. "Mr. Michael, my name is Ashley. I'm the daughter of George, the doorman at the company's building. I heard you're continuing Mr. Roberts' work." "Yes, Ashley, how can I help you?" "My father told me you've been helping people with microcredit. I just finished my business degree and have an idea for opening a natural products store. Could you help me?" Michael smiled. This was exactly the kind of situation his father would have loved. The child of an employee wanting to start a business, seeking support to make a dream come true. "Of course, Ashley. Let's set up a meeting so you can present your project." A week later, Ashley was in the company's office presenting her business plan to Michael, Andrew, and other members of the fund's board. The young woman was sharp, well prepared, and had a solid idea. "Approved," Andrew said at the end of the presentation. "You'll be our next investment." "But there's one condition," Michael added. "Once your store is running well, you must help someone else achieve their dream too." Ashley agreed with tears in her eyes. That's exactly how the network created by Robert worked. Every person helped committed to helping others. 6 months later, Ashley's shop was running perfectly, and she had already referred 3 people to receive microloans. The cycle continued. During that time, Michael and Andrew strengthened their relationship like never before. They discovered that, despite their differences, they complemented each other perfectly. Michael had the sensitivity to identify human needs and opportunities, while Andrew ensured the projects were financially viable. "You know, Michael," Andrew said one afternoon as they reviewed the fund's reports, "I think I finally understand why Dad always seemed torn." "How so?" "He lived in 2 worlds. In the business world, he had to be tough and competitive, but in the world of people, he was kind and generous. So it must have been exhausting to maintain that double life for so long. And now we've managed to unite those 2 worlds, to do business that's both profitable and humane. I think that's what he always wanted, but didn't know how to achieve in his time." Michael picked up the coin, which now always sat on his desk. "Do you think he knew we'd get here?" "I think he hoped. Leaving the coin to you was his way of making sure we discovered the human side of business, and leaving the company to me was to ensure we didn't lose the practical side. One last lesson, even after he was gone. The greatest of all." A year after the will was read, the brothers organized a large gathering to celebrate the results of the first year of their new company. The event was held in the same church hall where it had all begun. Over 200 people attended, from Clarence and Mrs. Henderson, their first allies, to Ashley and other young entrepreneurs who had recently benefited. Michael stepped onto the small makeshift stage, holding the coin that had become the symbol of the network. "A year ago, I thought I'd received the smallest inheritance possible," he began, drawing laughter from the crowd. "An old coin, while my brother got all the money." Andrew laughed too, shaking his head. "Today I understand I received much more than money," Michael continued. "I received the chance to meet all of you, to learn that true wealth lies in the connections we make, the lives we touch, the good we keep in motion." He paused, emotional. "My father created this network over 40 years ago. You kept it alive all these years, and now, together, we're expanding it so more families can benefit." The applause was long and warm. Many wiped away tears, remembering the man who had planted the first seeds of that community. Andrew also took the stage. "All my life, I thought my father was cold and calculating," he admitted. "Discovering he had this generous side completely changed how I see business and life." He looked at Michael. "And realizing my brother had qualities I'd never valued, changed how I see our family. Today, we're true partners, something that never happened before." Clarence stood up in the middle of the crowd. "If I may, I'd like to say a few words," he requested. "Of course, Clarence," Michael replied. The 70-year-old man walked to the front of the hall. "I met Mr. Robert when I was at rock bottom. He pulled me out and taught me that life is only worth living when we can help others." He pointed to the brothers. "You two didn't just continue his work, you made it better." Clarence turned to the audience. Back then, we depended on one person's kindness. Today, we're a community where everyone helps each other. That's much stronger and lasting." Once again, applause filled the hall. At the end of the evening, when almost everyone had already left, Michael and Andrew walked together through the streets of Queens. "Andrew, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you regret Dad leaving the company to you?" Andrew thought for a moment. "No. I think he made the right choice. I had the technical knowledge needed to keep the company running, but you had something I didn't." "What?" "The ability to see beyond the numbers, to understand that behind every business transaction, there's a person with dreams, fears, and needs." They stopped at a corner, waiting for the light to change. "And you, Michael? Do you regret receiving just the coin?" Michael took the coin from his pocket and examined it under the streetlight. "This coin gave me far more than any amount of money ever could. It gave me a purpose, a mission, a community. It gave me the chance to know my father for who he truly was, even after he was gone. And it gave me the chance to know my real brother too," Andrew added. "To be honest, I think Dad knew exactly what he was doing," Michael said. "He understood our personalities and knew we needed to go through this journey to discover our true potential." One final lesson. The most important of all. 2 years later, the St. Joseph Solidarity Network, as it was now officially called, had expanded to 5 neighborhoods in New York City. The microcredit program had helped over 100 families, and many of them were now in a position to help others. Michael had married Jennifer, a psychologist he'd met during one of the network's events, who shared his passion for social causes. Andrew remained single but was much happier and professionally fulfilled. The family business had become a model for social enterprise, studied in universities and inspiring other companies to adopt similar practices. One Friday afternoon, Michael was in his office when he received a call that moved him deeply. "Mr. Michael, this is Josephine, Clarence's granddaughter." "Hi, Josephine. How are you?" "I'm well, thank you. Mr. Michael, my grandfather passed away yesterday. It was peaceful. He went in his sleep. No suffering." Michael felt a tightness in his chest. Clarence had become like a grandfather to him, always present, always wise, always willing to help. "I'm so sorry, Josephine. Your grandfather was a very special person." "I know, and he left a message for you." "What message?" "He said that when the time came, you should choose a young person to pass the coin forward. Just as your father gave it to you, there would come a time when you'd find someone to carry on the work." Michael fell silent, absorbing the words. "Did he say anything else?" "He said you'd know when the time was right and that you'd choose the right person. And he asked me to thank you for everything you've done for the community." After hanging up, Michael stared at the coin for a long time. Clarence was right. The time would come to pass it on, to keep the cycle going. But not yet. There was still so much work to do, so many people to help, so many lives to change. Andrew walked into the office without knocking, as he always did. "Michael, I finished the quarterly reports. The numbers are excellent, and more importantly, we have a waiting list of people wanting to join the network." "That's great. How's the new neighborhood project coming along?" "We start next week. We've already identified 15 families who could benefit from microcredit and 10 small business owners willing to invest in the fund." Michael smiled. The network kept growing, spreading like ripples in water after a stone is thrown. "Andrew, I need to tell you something." "What?" "Clarence passed away yesterday." Andrew's face fell. He had also grown very fond of the elderly man. He left a message, said when the time came I should pass the coin on to someone younger. "And will you do that?" "When the time comes, yes, but it hasn't yet." "How will you know?" "Clarence said I'd know, and I trust him." Andrew sat in the chair across from his brother's desk. "Michael, have you ever stopped to think about everything that's happened since that day in Dr. Thompson's office?" "I think about it often. If someone had told me this story 2 years ago, I'd have said it was impossible. A will that seemed unfair turned into the fairest thing I've ever seen." Dad knew us better than we knew ourselves. And he knew we needed each other to become the people he hoped we'd be. That night, Michael dreamed of his father. Robert was smiling, satisfied, watching everything his sons had built together. "Dad," Michael said in the dream, "I think I finally understand your final lesson." What was it? That the real inheritance isn't what we leave for our children, but what we leave in them. Values, principles, the ability to make a difference in others' lives. Robert nodded. And that true love sometimes must disguise itself as toughness to teach the most important lessons. Exactly. You were never cold with us, Dad. You were just preparing us to discover our true strength. And did you? We learned that together we're much stronger than we imagined, and that the only wealth that truly matters isn't measured in money, but in lives changed. When Michael woke, there were tears in his eyes, but he felt at peace. He had finally fully understood the gift his father had left him. The coin remained on his desk, but now he knew that one day he would pass it on. And when that happened, the solidarity network Robert had created would continue to spread, touching more lives, creating more opportunities, keeping alive the philosophy that true wealth lies in serving others. 3 years had passed since that transformative day in Dr. Thompson's office. The St. Joseph Solidarity Network had become a national model for cooperative economics. Michael had written a book about the coin and the network, with all royalties donated to the fund. Andrew had been invited to speak at several universities about social impact business, something he'd never imagined doing. He'd discovered a talent for teaching and enjoyed inspiring young entrepreneurs to think beyond profit. One Monday morning, Michael was reviewing proposals for new projects when his assistant announced an unexpected visitor. "Mr. Michael, there's a young woman here who says she has a special proposal. She doesn't have an appointment but insists it's very important. Send her in." The door opened and in walked a young black woman about 25, dressed simply but with confident poise. Something about her reminded Michael of himself when he was younger, determination mixed with nervousness. "Mr. Michael, my name is Zoe Washington. I'm Clarence's great-granddaughter." Michael stood immediately, surprised and moved. "Zoe, Clarence spoke of you often. How's your family?" "Everyone's well, thank you. Mr. Michael, I came because I have a proposal, but first I need to tell you my story." "Please, sit. I'm listening." Zoe took a deep breath before beginning. "I grew up hearing my great-grandfather's stories about Mr. Robert and everything you all built afterward. I always knew I wanted to be part of it somehow." "What do you do now?" "I have a degree in social work and work with at-risk youth. But I have a bigger dream." She pulled a folder from her bag and placed it on the table. "I want to create a project that brings the network's methodology to other states. Start small, but with potential for nationwide growth." Michael opened the folder and was impressed by the quality of the material. Zoe had prepared a detailed study, complete with market research, feasibility analysis, implementation timeline, and financial projections. "This is very professional, Zoe. Did you do all this yourself?" "I had help from some college professors and colleagues who work in the field, but the idea and the research are mine." Michael kept flipping through the project. It was ambitious but well-grounded, and more importantly, it showed a deep understanding of the philosophy driving the network. "Zoe, may I ask why you want to do this?" "Because I've seen the transformative power of this methodology in my own family. My great-grandfather always said that a good deed multiplies infinitely when done the right way. I want to be part of that multiplication." "And how do you plan to start?" "With your help and Mr. Andrews. I need guidance, some initial resources, and most of all, permission to use the methodology you developed." Michael sensed something special in that conversation. There was an energy in the young woman that reminded him of himself when he first discovered the meaning of the coin. "Zoe, I'll be direct with you. Your project is excellent, but implementing it requires much more than good intentions. It demands total dedication, the ability to handle frustrations, and above all, the understanding that results don't always come quickly." "I understand, Mr. Michael, and I'm prepared for that." "Are you sure? Because if we decide to support your project, you'll become part of something much bigger than just a job. You'll become a guardian of a legacy." Zoe's eyes sparkled. That's exactly what I want. Michael picked up the coin from the table and studied it for a moment. Then he looked at Zoe. I'll make you an offer. I'll present your project to Andrew and the network's board. If approved, you'll receive all the support you need to implement it. Really? Zoe could barely contain her excitement. But there's one condition. What is it? You'll have to promise that if the project succeeds, you'll seek out others to expand it even further. The goal isn't to create your own project, but to plant seeds that others can cultivate. I promise. Michael extended his hand to Zoe. Then we have a deal. A week later, Zoe presented her project to the network's board. The approval was unanimous. Andrew was particularly impressed by the young woman's maturity and her grasp of the business aspects of social work. Michael, Andrew said after the meeting, I think we found our successor. What do you mean? Zoe has everything you had when you discovered the coin: passion, intelligence, leadership, and more. She has technical training and vision. Michael looked out the office window, thoughtful. Do you think the time has come? I think Clarence knew what he was talking about. Zoe didn't just appear here by chance. That night, Michael talked at length with Jennifer about the possibility of passing the coin to Zoe. How do you feel about this? Jennifer asked. I feel it's the right thing to do. The coin was never truly mine. It's always been a symbol of responsibility meant to be passed on. And do you feel ready to pass it forward? I feel I've done my part. I helped expand the network, strengthened the relationship with Andrew, and structured everything so it could grow sustainably. Now it's time for someone younger to take it to the next level. Then do it. 3 months later, in a simple but moving ceremony held in the same hall where it all began, Michael passed the coin to Zoe. Over 300 people were present, including nearly everyone who had been helped by the network over the years. Zoe, said Michael during the ceremony, this coin represents so much more than an object. It represents the trust of hundreds of people who believe in your ability to continue work that began over 40 years ago. I understand the responsibility, Mr. Peterson, Zoe replied, visibly moved, and I promise to honor it. But remember, he continued, the day will come when you too must pass it on. The coin must never stop. It must keep circulating, always finding someone willing to serve others. I understand. Michael placed the coin in Zoe's hands. For a moment, he felt a pang of nostalgia, but it was quickly replaced by a sense of mission accomplished. Now it's your turn to discover everything this coin can teach. Andrew stepped forward and placed a hand on his brother's shoulder. Dad would be proud, he whispered. They all would, Michael answered, thinking of Robert, Clarence, and so many others who had contributed to this moment. The celebration lasted late into the night, with stories being shared, plans being discussed, and above all, the certainty that the legacy would live on in the hands of a new generation. 2 days later, Zoe sought out Michael in his office. Mr. Peterson, I have a question. Go ahead. How will I know when it's time to pass the coin on? Michael smiled, remembering asking Clarence the same thing years ago. You'll know. Someone will appear with the same spark in their eyes that you had when you first came here. Someone who understands that true value isn't in what we gain, but in what we give. What if I choose wrong? The coin has its own wisdom. It always finds the right people at the right time. Zoe nodded, carefully tucking the coin into a small pouch she would always carry. Mr. Peterson, may I ask one more thing? Of course. Do you regret anything on this journey? Michael thought for a moment. I regret taking so long to understand my father. I regret not realizing sooner that Andrew and I were the perfect team. But beyond that, no. Every hardship, every discovery, every person I met along the way was necessary to get us where we are. And now, what will you do? Jennifer and I are thinking of traveling a bit, visiting other social projects across the country, learning new things. And you? You'll keep the work going here. What if we need help? We'll always be here, but I'm sure you'll do even better than we did. 6 months later, Michael received a call from Zoe. Mr. Peterson, I have amazing news. I'm listening. We've implemented the methodology in 3 towns in Pennsylvania. And there's more. A group of entrepreneurs in California wants to replicate the model there too. That's wonderful, Zoe. And how are things there? The network in New York City keeps growing. 8 neighborhoods are now involved, with over 200 families helped. Andrew is shining in his talks, and I'm learning something new every day. And the coin? It's always with me. Sometimes I hold it and think about everything it represents, all the people it's touched. Have you thought about who might be next? It's not time yet, but I'll admit I watch the young people who come in, looking for that special spark you mentioned. Michael smiled. You're on the right path. End of story. Now tell me, what did you think of this touching story? Do you believe Michael made the right choice in passing the coin to Zoe? Can the Solidarity Network truly grow and touch even more lives? Share your honest thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear what you think about this journey of discovery, forgiveness, and family renewal. If this story has touched your heart in any way, don't forget to leave your like, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you won't miss other inspiring stories like this one.